Aaron, good to have you here. Today, really, the topic of the day is really going into the nitty-gritty of the models of startup accelerators, something that we've been exposed to and the world is getting exposed to, but is something that has been changing. We've seen changing dramatically over the past few years. And you guys, as a 500 startup, is probably you're one of the main leaders in that process. So looking forward to the discussion. Maybe to get started, give us a little bit of your background. Why you and startups?
Yeah, every day I ask myself that question. My story is I was working a lot of odd jobs in college, pretty much just like anything that I could find that was like highest paying per hour, and I would just teach myself whatever, and I got into web development. And after I got through my undergrad, I started a company by accident that ended up ranking #1 for a bunch of stuff in Google. Not really a startup, more of an agency, but it was my first experience.
Why you say by accident? That is, a friend of yours brought you?
No, I mean, like there's a couple of guys who knew how to code, and our job was to work with a client to get them to build a couple different websites because they had different product lines they didn't want to touch. And I followed the directions of a book, and they said, okay, let's just do this. And the next thing you know, we're ranking #1 for a bunch of stuff. And I said,
it seems to be working.
It's that easy.
It was through SEO?
Yes, through SEO. And this is, I'm very old. This is back when, Google's kind of like coming into its own. Yeah. And so maybe it was just the right place, right time, a little bit of luck, but I think that's a lot of just how startup works. Fast forward several years. At this point, I founded 4 companies, been on 3 founding teams. Maybe 2 good stories in there. The rest are like, get me a beer, and I'll cry about it. But what I've learned through that time is that founders need support. I know that's why I believe in the accelerator model. I know that's why I believe in 500 startups, why I choose to give my time to that project. And I find that the most valuable thing I can do is to be available to my startups and treat every request with empathy. You talked about how it's a holiday weekend upcoming. You'll be going to Tahoe. I will be in my office because startup founders' problems don't know vacation. And I recall that quite well. Nice.
I was just reading here your bio somewhere. Master skills includes, but it's not limited to, growth, hackery, SEO, talked about this, system automation, data architecture, leadership coaching, digital marketing of all kinds, big hairdos, and that joke. So clearly, big hairdos are part of your persona to be part of your bio. Great. So let's dive straight into it, because I want to go as much as possible into the nitty-gritty, as much as you can share of the economics also of a startup accelerator. So maybe let's define what the heck is today, 2020, a startup accelerator, according to you. What are the main purposes of a startup accelerator? What do you define as startup accelerators versus early stage fund, or versus an incubator, or all the different shapes or forms that the world knows is coming to put in the market?
Yeah, I mean, accelerators are a service, a product, if you like, and they follow the exact same evolution. Say 10 years ago when 500 was getting started, not a lot of exposure to mentors and skills for people who like me to a certain extent just moved west with nothing more than a dream, right? And these days, every accelerator, incubator, whatever they want to call themselves, starts to specialize in things, right? And 500 has historically been known as a growth-centric accelerator. So that is to say, yes, we're going to help you fundraise and do all the things that VC should help you do, but we work with growth experts who are products of the 500 network to teach you things, give you coaching, or teach your staff, help you hire, that kind of stuff, but really kind of around the idea of growth. So accelerator to me means that we're not just helping grow the business, but it's our duty to help find businesses, or to pick businesses rather, that are ready for that growth. And that can be a real challenge because every startup thinks they're ready to grow, but at no point in my 7-company history do I think I was ever ready for a one-stop shop. There's always a flip, or rather a switch that you can flip, right? There's stuff that's going to break, and having a mentor network that can help you navigate that while also trying to grow is something that I think we do very, very well.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about 500 and its angle in a second, but maybe to set the stage and definitions. Accelerator equals investments, equity, or not in your definition?
In my Aaron definition, does not represent all of 500. Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think that it is important for a startup or anybody, any two people who make a deal. I think it's important that there's like interest alignment, right?
Yeah.
People who are giving you high quality programming for free, probably worth asking why. Maybe you're the product, very Facebook, right? If someone's taking a fair amount of equity or cash without delivering a lot of value, also worth asking, is this the kind of thing that I want? And this is one of the challenges I try to help our startups who are applying for us, whether or not they get in, think through is, I apply to 500, I apply to YC, I apply to Plug&Play, I apply to all these well-known names because I feel like I'm supposed to, but is this the right program for me? And more importantly, is right now the time to do it?
And then again, this definition has been changing over time, but what we associate mentally to an accelerator is different here, or used to be different than what happens, for example, in a few countries outside or in Italy. So if in my definition, accelerator as a direct investment, there is an equity angle to it. Otherwise, it would be something different with an incubator or whatnot. Hence, activities like StartX that we mentioned a moment ago, or Plug&Play are not real accelerators, are something for something, in support. Each of them has a different angle, but I think you're still at the very core of what the initial concept of an accelerator was. 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to spend a good amount of time with Dave McClure, one of your founding partners, and when still at kind of the division at the time, really the accelerators of reference were really a handful. So YC was the one that got started. You guys got started maybe 2 or 3 years later. I don't have timing, but it's shortly after that, right? So that was the model that clearly people were looking at. And YC, while being super successful, has really matured their way of doing business. Also with a backing of a fund that is in $1 billion. So where really the value proposition, also the economics are slightly different. I have the impression that though your value proposition as conceived initially hasn't changed that much, right? The world has changed, and so there are different angles, but we can talk about the very terms that you provide, and the fact that there are also funds, larger or smaller, that support different regions. But I think what I gather during the funding times was number two things basically. One is the world is full of opportunities. So US and Silicon Valley in particular is not the only provider of solutions. So a very bold statement of looking around the world and being open in a time where very few funds, honestly, from here actually were looking even outside of Silicon Valley. So that was a very, very bold move that today I think is part of the norm, also given the cost of this region. And number two, it was kind of a number game, right? So I remember a few slides from Dave, showing why that from an economical point of view that would make sense, right? So I mean, there's the spray and pray as a clearly a more of a negative connotation, turn into there is a reason for that, and that's why, right? So the whole idea of having numbers of investments that have to be spread out with a certain logic behind. What is 500 Startups today?
Wow, we're a lot of stuff. We are, well over a dozen funds around the world. We are a partner to corporates and governments to help them build their own version of Silicon Valley in their own backyard. We are an education apparatus for people who are angel investors who want to become VCs, or people with money who want to become better investors, to learn from our experience, all of our successes and all our mistakes, to share that knowledge. And so in that way, I think we are first and foremost educators. which I think is what, first and foremost, investors, before we...
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I would have said first a foremost investor, and then the rest is in support of.
Now I'm going to get fired.
Exactly. All right, we shoot that again. First and foremost, investor.
We're first and foremost investors, but shortly after that, we're also educators, because I think to make an investment at an angel capacity, let's say, is to lend your checkbook, sure, and some slice of your expertise to a founding team that is out there to build something. But to sell them the service of acceleration and the inherent community that it provides, we're not just teaching startups how to make better Facebook ads, optimize Google ad spend, be, analytics evangelists. We're teaching them how to be founders. And our product market fit, the more that I've studied, I've been with 500 for almost 4 years. I went through 500 as a batch company 2014, 2015, so batch 12. We're on batch 26. The more I've studied our customer, these are not just startup founders of any slice. These are founders who are aware that this is my second time doing this. I want to ask questions. I don't want to feel bad for asking questions. And I want to join a community of people who want to help each other out. And I think that's what our founders prioritize. That was definitely my sense when I was applying to different programs and trying to figure out for my startup at the time, what is it that I want? And how are these offerings different? How are they the same? And which one is the right shoe for me to put on and truly good use for right now? And what struck me about 500, and the reason why I turned down other offers to go to 500, was because I didn't feel through the getting to know the community, getting to know my investment partners, I didn't feel like there was such a thing as a stupid question. In fact, I quite clearly remember one partner in particular telling me the only stupid question is the question you didn't ask. And I've made that my motto throughout my experience now leading the portfolio team. So education is a huge part of what we do, not just for founders, but for everybody who's involved in the founder experience. And I think that as our North Star has served us well as we've grown throughout the years.
So let's give some numbers also to understand the scale. I mean, initially when it was called 500 startups, people are like, well, are you going to ever reach 500? I think you reached 500 startups probably in the first 3 years. Mm-hmm. How many? So just simplifying the structure to that, then we can talk about additional service, but accelerated companies versus, funds managed or under management around the world. So, and then how many people work in all these operations? Just give us.
Yeah, so we're 150 people around the world. That number is definitely slated to grow this year by a not small number. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to disclose, so I'm not going to. But yeah, we've definitely got growth on the mind. What was the other question? How many companies
have you accelerated? So went through the acceleration program, then we can talk about investments.
Yeah, so 26 batches, just San Francisco, roughly 30 each, give or take. And then we've got 2,500 investments around the world that have gone through sometimes some form of program, sometimes direct. But the way that we don't view our global presence as San Francisco's over here, and then we have our Vietnam fund over here, we exchange founders and deal flow pretty readily because each one of those campuses or funds, if you like, each one of the offerings is different, right? The main appeal to founders who want a global presence, who want to think globally like we do, is that yes, I'm starting in not the United States, or yes, I'm starting in the United States, but I know that my product or service is going to make it around the world. And everyone thinks that, and they're not always right. But by having partnerships with governments, corporates, financiers in local territories, boots on the ground relationships, I've learned every day that I am in the relationship business more than anything else. It doesn't matter how smart I am about SEO, fundraising, storytelling, you name it. If I can't make a good introduction, then I'm not really worth it as an investor. And so by having those relationships on the ground, we're able to make a more impactful difference in our startups' lives. And because of that, you'll see these investments that have gone through the San Francisco Accelerator and then expand to other places. They raise better, they raise faster because we can refer them to someone that we know that's a part of our team, and everyone sort of has a joint stake in seeing them succeed. So a lot of voices. I think our founder community is roughly 6,000. And these are all investment folks, not to say nothing of the free programs that we offer.
So 6,000 are what you consider all the startups that somewhere you own equity.
Correct. 6,000 founders.
Founders.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Just over a little bit over 2,500 investments that we own equity in. Yes.
Got it. And that's a mix between accelerations and investment then. And let's talk about the different, you alluded to that, but the different funds that you have in different regions. How do they come together? What is if there's a regional focus? I mean, you did mention that it's all global, it is all to support global expansion, but how do they work, and what are the kind of the geographies that you guys are mostly active?
So some of our more active non-main funds, so non-San Francisco based, are in Middle East, North Africa, Malaysia, and Mexico, of course.
Yeah, but you have a lot in Asia.
Tons of
a lot of Malaysia, I mean, Thailand.
No, of course. And the way we think about that, I actually was just occurred to me. We're kind of in the business of recruiting also, because whether it's founders at an early stage, there's not a lot of like metrics, there's not a lot of data. I mean, there's some, but like not enough to make an empirical decision on. So I kind of have to get to know who is this person and do I see them making good choices? Like that's like one of my first 3 questions, right? It's like, let's get to know you and how you think. Attracting GPs, and funds in different places is no different. Attracting good partners in regions is no different. You want people who are very tech forward and understand how tech works. Understand how investment works. There are corporates who won't tolerate anything less than a 95% success rate, and that is not venture capital. There are more sad stories than there are unicorn stories, and that's just how the sausage is made. But in places where we are currently active or looking to become active, say within the next 3 to 5 years, it's always around this story of talent. Is there good engineering talent? Is there a desire on the investment side to, support these communities of founders? Are there corporates and governments who can do things to reduce costs and reduce barriers of entry into creating a startup? And if you can find those things, which again is how we think of the world, as we train the investors, we train the governments, we train the corporates, we train the startups. And if we can get all of that done right, what you have is a Silicon Valley that's not in Silicon Valley. Because it's really expensive for a founder to come out here, to pay $3,000 a month in rent for 1 bed. And that's really expensive to me, the investor, because they got to raise the money from me for that. And that's awful. So if we can help create these places all around the world through good talent, through good people, that to us is our vision for success.
Which I think it was the vision from the very beginning. So I think I commend you for that. I think it was definitely, and today is kind of a no-brainer also for a bunch of us and others. But I think that it took time before we all were in agreement with that. I still want to talk about how the sausage actually gets made, and then we can talk about the expansion. But I was thinking that there were a few, back to really at the beginning, the core and the acceleration. I think there were a few tests to start a similar program that you had here in Europe for some time. I think it was a program in London, if I'm correct. Same with Mexico, with Mexican VC, that I think was an acquisition. What's the vision of the day? Is it still the acceleration, at least the main one in the standard terms of batches, is still concentrated in Silicon Valley, and other regions are actually doing different models?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to. I know we want to be wherever good founding talent can be found, and if it makes sense, and not to go off a little bit of a tangent here, but I don't think of myself as an investor or a venture capitalist. I think of myself as a founder advocate. Technically, this is my first real job because I've only ever started companies. So working for the woman has been an adjustment, right? And not being the boss of the place. But what I know, or what I bring to the table from those experiences, is that you have to be, like I said, very empathetic to the founder's needs. And if there are great business ideas in Middle East, Cambodia, Nigeria, wherever, you have to find ways to make yourself relevant to the startups in that area. So we believe in either bringing programs to them, or if it makes sense, to set up shop. But in order for us to do that effectively, we have to build that that community, because it literally takes a village to help any one startup succeed. And it's not enough to go into a territory and deliver programming. It's not enough to go into a territory and just have a good investor class. These things need each other to survive. And so I would imagine that our future is built around, can we identify these places where the community in its entirety is bought in helping a startup succeed? And if that is the case, then that is where we'll go.
And so, is there an acceleration program today in Mexico?
Yes, there is.
Okay,
Yes,
there is. And let's talk about kind of the current terms. I don't know if I think is open, right, to discussion. The current terms that you have for startups coming to the accelerator here. Then we can talk about investments, but just the accelerator program. What are the current terms?
Yeah, our standard terms are 150,000 for 6% in equity. There are, no two startups are the same. And as the accelerator space gets more and more competitive, I think there's an increased desire, at least on the part of startups, to try to say this is what I'm worth. Mm-hmm. Advice for founders: if you should practice that conversation before coming to me, because I'll probably not agree, or at least ask you to help me understand why you think your valuation is north of our pretty standard 2.5 million, right? Depending on the stage, right? So I like to think of it as an active discussion. And again, as a founder advocate, I want to take you through that process and do what I do, which is teach you how to have that conversation better next time. But largely, we don't deviate from that unless it's truly extraordinary circumstances.
I didn't even know there was those circumstances. I thought it was non-negotiable.
Yeah. There are cases, very few,
yeah,
where you might see someone who's got, they've got previous exits.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's something I care about, because that would suggest that all things being equal, it won't be. But if you're a founder with a long track record versus someone who's relatively green, my money's technically safer over here. Right. So that is at least a point of discussion. Right.
Yeah.
Everyone comes in and asks for different terms. Very, 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 I could probably count on one hand. But to say that you shouldn't have that discussion, that you should just accept whatever you're being given, either from me or anybody else, that would be bad information, and I won't spread it.
Are the profiles of the startups that you accept today in the accelerator much different from what we used to accept at the beginning? Or in other words, has that, your focus changed in terms of maturity, or maybe some of the verticals, or I think the sausage is still the same?
The conversation starts off the same, right? Like, the question I always end every single interview for our accelerator with is, what do you want from the 500 experience? 4 months, right? I see where you are today, more or less. What do you want at the end of that 4 months to give me an A, right? Because the reason why 500 remains one of the big three is because we have to be able to deliver on what the expectations of the customer are, just like any other business. And I think that, aligning what we're good at, which is, the growth focused teachings and mentorship, with what the startup wants, generally guides that direction. But we've been experimenting with more stuff, including getting a little bit earlier, especially for some of the emerging technologies or deeper tech. So, crypto, for example, who knows what that was a couple of years ago, and it waxes and wanes. But you can't expect the same kind of growth metrics because there's not really a standard, right? So does that mean we don't make the bet? No, we just have to get creative with how we deal with it. So I think that we're getting more flexible in how we think of who we let in and when. But it's just so important for startups to do their research ahead of time, because there's not, every time we open up our applications, it's somewhere between 2,000 to 4,000 startups that apply. And it's very rare that I see a startup that's doing something purely unique. What I'm shopping for is not, does this problem and solution need solving? Not just that. Is the way that you're solving this problem unique? Mm-hmm. And do I like that compared to the other ways I'm seeing it solved by other startups that you may not even know anything about?
Mm-hmm. And the focus of the stage of development where you create the most value is still on the seed stage, I guess.
Yeah, seed stage.
Product has to be in the market, or close to be in the market, I assume, right? So to have some numbers to start working on.
Yeah. The our version of the accelerator has evolved, will evolve a lot over this calendar year. So we're announcing very, very soon that the accelerator start and stop times are going away. We're going to a rolling recruitment cycle.
Yeah, I was about to ask you. It feels like this is where the world is going, right? Anyways, I mean, more flexibility and it makes sense.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, like I was rejected from 500 startups 3 times. Mm-hmm. Right, so that is a badge of honor that I wear every day because now I run the place. I'm like, But again, founder advocate. When you are rejected from a program, your option, if it's 500 is the only program in the world, your option is to wait 6 months for us to be ready to receive you again, and that's a death sentence. You know, there are founders who are like this close that if I just had, you know, a different product to sell or different services to offer, I would be able to give them a little bit more time and then make a deal. So that's something we're deploying at the conclusion of this bash. I'm very excited for that. With that comes additional flexibility in the way that we can make a difference in stage, right? We're toying with, historically, largely, 99% of the time you have to have a product because our curriculum is largely focused around, okay, here's how you do smoke tests and test things and that kind of stuff. And I try to avoid giving programming and mentorship to startups where the content is interesting but not actionable. Because that's a waste of their time. You need to solve the biggest problems of the business today, and then once those problems are solved, we got to solve the biggest problems of the business tomorrow. So I like to do stuff that's immediately applicable. But the deals are getting more competitive. There's lots of other people who are offering accelerators and programs of all sorts. And even outside of competition, you know, if there's a great startup with great founders doing something incredible that I believe in, I want to be able to accept them no matter what their stage is. So we're looking even earlier and earlier and experimenting with that as well. So a lot of the rule book, you know, we helped build the accelerator model, but it seems a little hypocritical to tell my founders every day you've got to innovate in order to be the best, and not innovate the model. Yes. So I think, you know, we're taking our own advice.
No, I think that's I think part of what we started the conversation with, that this is a world that is evolving, and thank God that is evolving. I think also the number of offers out there are different, and the way that the company actually see as options are different. Does that mean that you're not going to have a demo day anymore? Because the rolling process is clearly kind of more difficult to decide.
Nowadays, here to stay. Like I wish my founders would listen to me. I feel like mom sometimes, right? They're here, you know.
They will listen to you because that's on video. So.
Oh, that's fine. Well, you heard it here first. You're here, you're in front of me, you're getting the programming, and then you graduate, you go off into the world, and then just like parents, I only hear from you during the holidays and when you want money.
When money, yes.
Right? But
you actually get the holidays more than what is the average of the other investors actually get. So
no, it's we do. Fun fact: we do most of our founder outreach during the holidays because that's when other people are usually a little bit more quiet. So if I'm trying to recruit startups, that's where I get the best open rates. So that's where I play. When holidays do exist, you don't take the day off, but you still are a human. So anyway, the question was what? I forgot.
No, demo days in general.
Oh, demo days. Yeah. Demo days will still be around. I think one of the most memorable experiences for me graduating was demo day because it was a coming of age, rite of passage, and it's important after you go through. Like accelerators should be impactful. They shouldn't just change the way the business works. They should change who you are and how you run your business. It should help refine what kind of founder are you. What kind of tools do you use to grow your team? Because that, after we're done with you, that's kind of what's coming next, right? It's not you and your 2 friends. Can you do this? Yeah, great. You go. You got to start hiring staff, right? So we need to teach you things that are, about how to run a business. And demo day is kind of where we close that chapter and recognize that you're ready for that world. I think there's a lot of confusion around what demo day was and what it is now. I tell startups all the time, it is a press event. It's kind of there to make you feel good. It's a way for me to say, practice your pitch, get to these numbers by this date, and ultimately it's all made up, right? This is a forcing function, the same way you try to trick me and say, well, I'm closing my round soon, so you better give me an answer. Well, we're good, demo day's coming soon, so you better do your homework. And it's really not more than that. Our intention is to keep the batch system, but instead of starting You're batch 26, you're batch 27 because you started here. You're batch 27, you're batch 28 because you ended here.
Got it.
And call it
So
that.
you still call that as a line in the sand.
Yeah.
150 people, and here I want to go more into really the nitty-gritty of the economics of accelerator funds or whatnot. So if it were a purely fund, economics are very simple, right? So there's a management fee and then there's a carry. In your case, it's a mix of things, but 150 people, I mean, with Silicon Valley cost, let's call it $30 million that you have of pure cost. How do you pay this $30 million a year? What are the main revenue streams?
Well, they don't pay it to me, I'll tell you that. One laugh, come on, guys. So all those aren't Silicon Valley salaries, right? I want to say
just averaging.
Our office, I want to say, is closer to 30, 40 folks. So really only about a third here in the Valley. But the way that we pay for that is, of course, program fees. I think you'll see as this model evolves that, so of that 150, we take
$50,000 that you take from of investment, you get some money backward.
Right, and so that is what keeps the roof over the heads and the mentors in the door. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, you've got our what we refer to internally as our ecosystems team, which is essentially the consulting arm. It goes out there and works with the corporates, works with the governments, and that kind of thing.
That's relatively new. How important is that? Because then I want to go. That's the second part of the conversation. I want to get a sense of how that involvement with the market is changing and how what kind of a pool that you're getting from the market. But I don't want the straight numbers, but how significant part of in your operation?
Yeah, I don't think you can have one without the other. And provide the menu, the array of services that makes you a market leader. So our mentor network, for instance, people I have to keep contact with, just provide knowledge to my 6,000 founders, is right now at about 300, and that's entirely too small. Some of those are paid, some of those are not paid. They volunteer. Many of them are graduates of the 500 program in some ways, so they're founders or growth experts who've been a part of a 500 company. But even so, mentorship is one of the things that they care about. Then you get to the platform, what I term, platform is one of those like nebulous phrases, but I term it like the value add services. The Slacks, the message boards, the job boards, the fundraising tools, all these sorts of things, those aren't cheap either. I think the only, we've, like every other firm that does what we do, we've debated, do we do this internally? Do we use other services for this? Right now we're using other services for this, but I personally would love to see us bring that in-house and make something that's truly unique. And helps leverage what we're good at, which is building strong relationships between founders so they can help each other and leverage a network effect. So these things are expensive, and we're only offering, if I had my wish list, about half of what I would like to offer, and people still think our program is expensive, and they're right. As a founder, you don't necessarily care about all these other things you might take advantage of someday. You care about how much money can you give me and how can I put that to work for me today. So I do think you'll see programs eventually evolve to a place where everything is free. But like I said in the beginning, it's worth asking, how do you make it free? And how does that impact me in my experience?
What do you consider today the closest thing to you? I'm not even competitors because there's so much space there, but the closest model to what you guys are running today?
That's a great question. I mean, if we're talking accelerators, of course, YC. They've interestingly gone.
Sorry to interrupt. But YC, I think it's just all they do, right? I mean, it's really the focus. There's
for sure.
There's no education. There's no nothing. I don't want to be called accelerator anymore. It's a fund eventually, early stage, but that's all they do.
And I mean, the class sizes are getting huge, right? Like, I've got anywhere between 20 to 40 startups under my roof at any given time, and I struggle to put on a demo day that means that's effective for these folks. So hats off to them for finding a way to make that work. I tend to think that the personal relationships that we have with our startups, difficult to quantify but have a lot of value, because my best citizens, founders, contribute to the network in a way that you wouldn't expect. I personally went through a struggle that involved some co-founder stuff and choices and that kind of thing. And when I didn't know who to come talk to, I was glad to be a part of a community because that was more valuable to me than it was to be a part of a fund. Because I couldn't go talk to my investors about the kind of problem I was mulling over. And because 500 prioritized that community and that's what I chose, there were not just a whole network of founders I could talk to, you can get that anywhere. These were founders that I knew would give me the best information and would help me navigate this very sensitive problem in a way that I would be comfortable with. And in that moment, you couldn't put a price on that. So YC is very close in this accelerator fund model. Plug&Play is all over the world. So that's probably close on if you were to compare apples to sort of apples, our ecosystems team. But what we find is that the candidates that we discover in these global programs eventually become investments, either at main fund San Francisco, if it makes sense, or at our thematic funds, which are geographically centered. So there isn't anybody who's quite doing it the way that we're doing. And there are days when I wonder if we're dreaming a little too big, but we're doing a lot. And at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to sort of building these communities of people who are all focused around the same thing, and they don't immediately realize, as an investor, I need good startups. In order to get good startups, I've got to have a good community. In order to have a good community, I have to have corporates and governments and all that bought in. And having all those conversations and all the business units that are involved is super complex, which is why I don't think that it exists. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, and back to Plug&Play and to the next part of the conversation is, Plug&Play I think is doing now a good job in being pulled by the market, corporates in general, as the main driver of making that connection and making that filtering that is becoming more and more of a priority for a bunch of different traditional industries. So less driven by investment, whereas you still said that you are an investor first, which I think eventually that's part of the DNA of what 500 is, and a little bit less, a service to the world of corporates. Although those two things are not mutually exclusive. Let's talk about this new era, if you will, of the appetite of government, as you mentioned. It's kind of a different animal, but as in particular of the companies or corporates that are trying to prioritizing their impact and their proximity with the innovative early stage solution, clearly don't have the tools. So how important is that for you guys, and how do you see that market develop, and where do you see the big opportunities?
Yeah, so for corporates, oh boy, I have a lot of words about this, and I'm aware that I'm on camera, but
just don't forget about the camera. It's just me and you.
It's just me and you, okay. Yeah, I think corporates know that they need to innovate. And I think there was a time when corporates thought they could do these sort of intrapreneurs, right? Who are entrepreneurs who are inside of the organization and they've got the funding and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know that works. It does sometimes, right? But I think if you want true innovation, if you want not what's next, but what's next, right? 2 steps ahead, you have to reach into the startup community, because in order to be a founder, you have to kind of be a little bit insane, right? And you're not going to find that in a corporate environment, or if you do, it's going to be, extremely rare. This is why you need corporates why corporates rather need what we're building, because we have access to the crazy people. And more than that, we can help them filter. But I think what I like most about the way that we're doing it is that there is a natural counterbalance between what the corporates want and what the startups want. What I mean by that is that the corporate venture accelerator program, whatever they're calling it, experience, is a lot like Facebook in that in that system, the startups are the product, right? So you're going to go there because ex-corporate multinational says, hey, you, small startup founder with no brand name, I would like to work with you. And you say, wow, finally, traction. This is something I can be proud of. And they want, well, probably they don't know what they want from you. And if they do know what they want from you, it's sometimes hard to walk that line of adding value to both the startup and the corporate. because there may or may not be a check or a product evolution or even a proof of concept or anything like this at the end of that rainbow. And what can sometimes happen, not always, but what can sometimes happen is that these startups get pulled away from their core vision because this big monster comes and says you should be thinking about it like this, and you think, oh yes, I should be thinking of it like this, and if I do it the way that they say, then maybe that means I'm going to increase the chances of a check or investment or a contract or something, and it doesn't always work out that way. And so because we have that investor DNA as well as that corporate DNA, we're in a constant state of collaboration around, all right, corporate wants this, startup needs this. A, can we make this connection and maybe get them close to the middle? And B, what is that middle? Because neither one knows how to talk to the other one about how to make it happen. So we think of ourselves as referees. We're functionally referees in that way, because I'm not going to treat my startups, my investments as a product, not just because I don't believe that that is how they should be treated, but also because it's not in my investment's interest for them to be distracted. Mm-hmm. I only want to make connections that are meaningful for both sides. I think that's something that we do rather uniquely, and I think it works pretty well for us.
How important are the tools that you guys have internally? Because those are big numbers that you're dealing with, right? So 6,000 companies you invested in, you've probably seen 100,000, probably more, we're getting close to. How important is that to have tools inside to be able to flag the right answer for a potential challenge that the corporates are asking you for? The reason why I'm asking, because you're also building some intelligence behind. I don't think there is one solution, but clearly that helps, especially in the era of AI and tools that are more sophisticated in making that semantic connection.
Yeah, no, there's the number of calls I get out of the blue, random, from data companies who want access to our portfolio and all the application data and systems and meta stuff that we generate is obscene. I've had to change my phone number. It's been that bad. And I think that our tool set, founder first, I tend to think of our tool sets needing to evolve at the speed of business that the founders themselves exist in. So are we adding value in a way that's useful? And selfishly, I want to stay relevant, because for everybody in the audience, I don't make any money on you on my initial investment. Not really. The way that I need to make money on you is by staying relevant to you, so that when your A comes and they say, we have this agreement, this pro rata agreement that says, we get to be in on this round, you don't have to let me in if you don't want to. I mean, you should. You made a deal, right? But there are founders who might say, no, I want to get this other investor, this other VC, this other entity on my cap table, and they can add more value than you have been or than you will continue to. And as a VC, I am now in a bit of a pickle. Do I sue my own startup? No. And if I did, what would happen? Well, it would become a press nightmare. And then I'm the VC that sues its own startups, and then there goes my deal flow.
Not cool.
So the dirty secret is the startups hold all the cards. And so the more service I can provide to them, usually through software, because that's what scales, the better position I am to hold my hand out and say, please, can I have some of your Series A? And they say, yes. And then that's where we get to exercise those rights. So I think that systems are of huge importance, not just for the maintenance, but also for the growth. We are building some shape of this internally right now.
So do you have a product manager? Do you have a team that builds product behind?
We have a number of full-time staffers who work effectively 3 jobs.
Okay. So on top of their, investing, mentoring.
I mean, of which me and Julio and Coulter are part of that sort of squad. And there's a couple of reasons why we don't, resource that. Number one, we want to keep the cost low to our founders, right? We want to keep the dry powder dry for future investments, all these things. And number two, I'm not sure if I had unlimited, access to capital, if I knew to go build this thing, if I would know when to ask for it, right? Mm-hmm. Because what I'm learning about my founders is that, they transact in so many different places. There's not really a system that exists that would be able to be designed or bought that would need to be very flexible. So this is something that, we're teaching ourselves. And anecdotally, I'll tell you that there are a number of service providers I work with who provide things like message boards and such. And There are days, because I'm a perfectionist, there are days I come to work and I say, God, I'm just never going to get this right. I'm so stupid. And then I'll have a call with them about, something, and I'll say, how are other people, other accelerators, other big names that you would probably recognize, how are they doing with this? And like, no one gets this right.
Yes.
No one gets this right. And then they tell me you're the most organized. And I say, all right. So
which is also a great opportunity, honestly. So I think the use of tools that are a little more sophisticated to cut through the noise, especially with the big numbers that we deal with.
There are so many services that come to me and say, let us give your founders something for free. Mm-hmm. Let us help them send their cap data, tables. Let us help them send their investor reports. And in that situation, the founder is the product. The startup is the product. They want you to put their information into their system so they can approach you about investment, or at least sell your information someplace else. So that's why I want to bring that kind of stuff internal, because founder first, I want to defend my founder's information in a way that keeps them in the driver's seat and selfishly keeps my stake, from being squandered. So I think there's some there, but I don't think that anybody has a good answer, including YC.
I agree. Last question, and we're kind of out of time, is more on the opportunities back in the subset of activities with corporates, which is, I think, just getting started. What do you think is the biggest opportunity there as an entity like yourself that is dealing with the support of the development of the ecosystem? And I give you two. One is to be more hands-on with the M&A, so really the ultimate transaction, or CVCs, corporate venture capital.
Yeah, so corporate venture, always depends on stage. Right? A lot of corporate venture folks say they want seed stage, but they probably want B stage, and they're a little far apart. You have to have an appetite for risk, and you have to know how to handle a founder. Our entire exec team are products of the 500 system. So I was batch 12, our COO Courtney, she's batch 4, our GP Tim, he's batch 4 also. Like, every one of us has gone through this process, and I think that's what helps us understand how to communicate to these founders. And that's one of the first things I teach, whether on the, innovation and partnership side or on the CVC side. You can't talk to these folks between 9 to 5. You can't get to them via email 2 weeks later. You have to move at their speed, and that's why I actually gave up starting startups to come to 500, is because I knew that I wanted to be a part of that experience. And the way I think of it now is I'm in the show still, I'm just not on the stage. So teaching the corporates how to be on the stage and be effective is probably the first step. The second step, I think, is I look at corporates as like think of this as physics, right? You've got two camps. You've got the applied side, and then you've got the theoretical side. Corporates are the theoretical. Well, it should look like this. And they get to say that because they've got millions of dollars to make it look like that, and time, right? Which is what the millions of dollars buys. The startup is the applied side. Well, I can't make it look like that today, and I can't make it look anything like that next month, but this week I can get you this small slice, right? They're the practical folks. And so drawing the bridge between these two things, I think, is where the long-term value is created. And you have to work with the right startup in the right stage, and the right corporate in the right frame of mind in order to make that connection mean anything to anybody and not be a waste of time. And I don't think there's a silver bullet. And I think that the corporates are evolving, but we're still not there yet on them being able to do that by themselves.
Are you planning to do CVC as a service?
I think that's interesting. I think that there's a lot of brand thought around that, both sides. Like, if we do that, why don't we get to put 500 on it? Or conversely, if corporate X wants to do that, they want their name on it. So we tend to do things that build our brand. Mm-hmm. But do I think that someone should? Probably.
And there are. I think there's reason why I'm asking you the question, because it's a topic that is becoming mature.
Yeah.
I think there is an appetite out there.
Yeah, I think so. The North Star that has always guided 500, again, founder first, is it going to benefit the founders? If yes, then that is something that interests us. So I don't know, maybe I should take that back home and see.
Yeah, that's a happy ending. Thank you.